How do I know if a co-living home will work in my area, Sam? All right, so this video is gonna be about how to test a market for co-living. One of the things that people ask me all the time is, Sam, I like this concept of co-living, the shared housing. I get that it solves affordable housing, but how do I know if I go out and, there's not a lot of people in my town that have experience with this, how do I know if it's gonna work in my city? Or maybe someone's in a little bit more of a rural city and they're like, hey, it sounds like a good concept. I can get deals and the cash flow is insane, but how do I know it'll work in my city? I too, first of all, have had this challenge. I too have had this thought, and I kind of developed some strategies along with my students that are in my program that really help us go into a new market and determine if that market is prime, is ready, has enough demand for this kind of affordable housing, or what I now call workforce housing niche called co-living, right? So how do we know if we're going to fill this house that we just spent X number of hundreds of thousands of dollars on, right? I remember one time when I was first launching my first co-living home in a town called Asheville, North Carolina. It actually wasn't even in Asheville. It was in a little town called Black Mountain, North Carolina. Now, Black Mountain, North Carolina is a town of 7,592 people, last time I checked. And it's right outside of the town, a little bit of a bigger town, Asheville, but Asheville's not huge. Asheville's probably 60 or 70,000 people. So overall, a fairly small town. When I first launched this co-living home, I was really nervous. I didn't think there was any way to test the market, and I launched this co-living home and I lowered the prices like really low. And in 2 weeks, we had a waiting list for this home. And I was like, oh my gosh, but then I thought, wouldn't it have been great to know that I would have had a waiting list and kind of what price points to put it out before I launched the home? And the answer is, of course it would have, but I didn't know anybody doing co-living in that market. So what we've determined, and this is kind of a scrappy play, and Facebook may not like me for saying what I'm about to say, but this is truly one of the best ways to get market data on a new market. And it is to run what we would call a test ad. Well, what's a test ad? Well, I'll be honest, it's a little bit of a fake ad, but it's not completely fake, and I'll explain exactly what I mean by this. When you run an ad on Facebook Marketplace, or you put an ad on Craigslist, or you put an ad on Roomies or Roomster, or all these sites, any of these sites that you can, I would recommend Facebook Marketplace be the place you post an ad. You do not put an address, but you put some real photos up that look like a co-living house. For my students, sometimes I'll even give them some photos from my co-living house, since they don't have a co-living house of their own quite yet, and they're working towards that process. I give them the photos, and we run an ad in that market. Now, we might even run 2 or 3 ads. We might run one at $900, at $800, and $700. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna run it, and when someone responds and says, hey, I'm interested in this room, is this still available? We're gonna respond back and just say, thank you so much for your interest in this room. We're actually creating a waiting list for this house, and we make sure we respond to every single person that messages us. So we're not ghosting anybody. We say, if you wouldn't mind, would you fill out this quick Google form, or would you answer this list of questions if you wanna put it right in the message back to them on Facebook, because sometimes Facebook doesn't like when you send links. So sometimes it's better just to be like, would you answer these questions? And I will put you at the top of the waiting list for the home that we're getting in this area. Okay. And if they're really interested, and you might not get everybody that fills this out because they might just move on to the next room, what you'll get a feel for is, wow, okay, in 1 week, I got, 20 responses to the $900 one, 50 responses to the $800 one, and 75 to the $25 one, right? Or whatever that is. So that's twice to the $25 one, the $700 one. But whatever the number of responses is, it allows you to kind of gauge interest in that area. The other thing you can do as far as trying to figure out what's the price point for your town is you can just comp it like you would a house. Think about it. If I want to know what this house is worth, I'm probably going to go live in the house right next door, and I'm going to see how much that house sold for. I'm going to compare them. I'm going to do a comp analysis, a comparative analysis. And it's the same thing with room rentals. When you go to room rentals, I'm going to type in, room rentals, Asheville, North Carolina. And first of all, I'm going to see what sites pop up on the first page, because those are, by the way, probably the sites that you want to be advertising on, in that market. Does that make sense? Because they're all on the first page. And that's already what's Google is, prioritizing as the top page, as the top searches. So you want to go ahead and you want to put those in, and you want to type in, and then you want to just go see what room rentals are actually going for. Okay. And you want to kind of compare, look at the photos. Is it a nice place? Is it not a nice place? What are the areas that are working? So you kind of can look to see if anybody else is doing it in your area and kind of base your prices based on that. Now, I will say this. If you go take quick cell phone photos of a room and slap it on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, you're probably not going to get the highest that the market will demand for a room rental. But if you take good photos, right? If you respond to people right away, if you ensure that you're doing some sort of a community like I teach in my homes, where you've got a common space in your co-living home, and maybe you're throwing community events, or maybe you're helping people with their personal development. If you can find a way to build a little bit of community in these homes, then you're going to be able, in my opinion, you're going to be able to demand the highest And obviously your product has to be awesome as well. Good professional photos. We really deck out. We don't furnish the bedrooms, but we really make sure the common areas are really well furnished. And if you do all these things, you're going to be able to demand the higher end of what the market out there is comping, right? And so I think that's something to keep in mind, because you might see someone posting a room for $500 and be like, well, it might be a piece of crap room. So if you can do a better job, you can demand more for sure. Okay, so these are some tips for you to kind of understand how can you test a market when you go into it, and kind of what are some ways I can find out what the price point for a room in that market might be. Use this to give yourself the confidence to then go pull the trigger and then go buy your first co-living home, right? Or your next co-living home. Now, obviously, one of the great things about running a mastermind like I do, we just hit, as of February 16th, 2024, we just hit almost 200 investors who are doing co-living all around the United States. So one of the benefits I have is I can tap into my investor group and say, hey guys, who's doing this in San Antonio? And I can go get their data. How many leads are you getting? What are your price points? Who's doing this in this market? So a lot of this also is just making those connections, maybe joining a mastermind where you can get around people who are doing this, being successful in it, learning the tricks of the trade, so to speak, and then just maybe even partnering with them in a market that you already know is doing fantastic. One of my inner circle students, his name is Seth. Seth traveled all over the United States trying to find the best market for co-living. He found that he wanted to invest in Charlotte, North Carolina, right alongside of me. And so we partnered up, and now we rehab co-living homes right here in Charlotte, North Carolina. We help manage his properties. And he did that because he knew what I was getting for rent. So I had the most market data that he could get because I already had 160 units in this area. Having that connection, if you can create that connection, is by far even better than running those test ads in a marketplace. Hopefully this helps you give the confidence to move forward with co-living as this wave kind of sweeps the nation and really helps solve affordable housing, workforce housing around the United States. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe, drop a comment, share this with someone who you think it would be helpful with. We'll see you on the other side.